Roses are red, violets are blue, sugar is sweet, but Carrie White eats skit. Wow. What a chilling, unforgettable line, right? So crude, almost childish, but it just perfectly captures the raw, brutal world we're diving into today. Welcome, everyone, to Artificially Literate. This is the place where books, films, and big ideas, well, they converge for a deep dive that hopefully really gets under your skin. Here we explore pieces of literature, compelling cinema, and significant cultural moments. We try to break down their philosophical, their literal meanings. Today, we are plunging headfirst into the, I think, profound and truly terrifying narrative of Stephen King's seminal horror novel, Carrie. And we're not just revisiting the pages. We're also going to be dissecting his most impactful film adaptations. Brian De Palma's iconic 1976 version and Kimberly Pierce's more modern take from 2013. Our mission really is to unpack the raw emotional core of this story, explore its literary, its philosophical depths, and maybe highlight some surprising differences and insights you get when you compare the original text with how it's been shown on screen.
Basically, you're going to get a shortcut to being really well informed about a story that honestly defines a genre and offers this chilling reflection on human cruelty.
It's amazing, isn't it? Almost 50 years later, and King's narrative still taps so powerfully into these universal fears and societal pressures. It really is a primal story. You've got profound isolation, relentless bullying, and then the explosive, often tragic consequences when cruelty just goes unchecked. And that makes it incredibly ripe for reinterpretation. Each adaptation kind of reflects the anxieties of its own time, but still stays acutely true to the terrifying essence of the original novel. It's a narrative that just resonates deeply. It forces you, the listener, to question the dormant potential, maybe destructive, maybe even creative, that might lie within any of us just waiting for that ultimate trigger.
Okay, let's really unpack this right from the beginning, because the genesis of Carrie White's terror, it's that scene, the one etched into everyone's mind. The shower scene at UN High. I mean, can you even imagine the sheer visceral humiliation? A 16-year-old girl getting her first period, and she has absolutely no idea what is happening to her own body. The book really emphasizes this profound, almost unthinkable ignorance, and it links it directly to her mother's, fanatical suppression of everything. King even gives us that specific, heartbreaking detail. Her classmate, Ruth Gogan, remembers seeing Carrie trying to use a tampon for lipstick the year before. It just underscores her absolute sheltered innocence, and the girl's reaction. It's just gut-wrenching. The communal bullying, the taunting, that chant of, plug it up, plug it up. Carrie just stood there, King says, dumbly like a patient ox, tragically aware the joke was on her, as always.
Yeah.
Even Sue Snell, who becomes important later, felt this vexing mixture of hate, revulsion, exasperation, and pity. It's a moment designed to just shatter any fragile sense of self Carrie might have possessed.
And that primal humiliation, wow, it's so impactful in King's original text, but it finds this chilling modern echo in De Palma's 76 film. De Palma just brilliantly captured that visceral panic, the communal bullying. He really established it as a foundational scene for movie horror. His direction made you feel Carrie's terror, the sheer power of the mob mentality. Then you look at Kimberly Pierce's 2013 adaptation, and she gives it this stark contemporary update that just amplifies the torment, right? Chris Hargensen doesn't just shout abuse. She records the whole thing on her phone, uploads it straight to YouTube. That just takes the public humiliation to a whole new level, something King couldn't have even conceived of back in '74. It makes the torment instantaneous, global, permanent. But this modernization, while it's effective in its own way, it might subtly change the initial shock of Carrie's personal ignorance for some viewers. I mean, today, with sex ed being more common, you might question if any teenager could really be that unaware. It potentially softens the raw power for initial bewilderment compared to how stuck it is in the book.
Yeah, that immediate global scale is definitely different from the book's more internal focus, but both really serve to activate what King subtly shows us are Carrie's nascent powers. Let's dig into those first ripples of telekinesis, because in the book, they're initially subconscious, almost like involuntary reflexes to extreme emotional distress. After Miss Desjardins, the gym teacher, confronts Carrie pretty angrily after the shower incident, suddenly a rack of softball bats in the locker room corner just falls over. Bang. Loud echo. Later in the assistant principal, Mr. Morton's office, Carrie lets out this building shriek of frustration and fear, and his heavy ceramic ashtray just topples off his desk, scattering pipe tobacco everywhere. It's subtle, but King describes the internal sensation Carrie feels so vividly it's a flex in her mind, like an elbow curling a dumbbell, but with no actual physical strength needed. It's her mind itself straining.
Right. And the novel makes it clear these aren't really her first TK moments. They're just the most recent ones she's aware of. The book drops this powerful revelation about a much older incident back when Carrie was only 3 years old. Stones just inexplicably rained down on the White House, and what triggered it? Margaret's insane rage because 3-year-old Carrie innocently saw a neighbor sunbathing. Margaret called it naked wickedness. Unbelievable. Margaret, in her deep denial, completely repressed this memory, and Carrie herself only has this vague, foggy recollection. But the memory, just like her power, starts to resurface as her abilities develop again. And this fits perfectly with the ideas presented in that fictional study in the book, The Shadow Exploded, which suggests the power only comes out in moments of extreme personal stress. Her talent was well hidden indeed, only surfacing when her internal world was in absolute turmoil. These early glimpses, the ashtray, the stones, they're crucial for understanding the deep-seated, maybe even hereditary nature of her power. It's this dormant potential flaring up under immense pressure.
And speaking of that pressure, that abuse, we absolutely have to unpack the terrifying figure of Carrie's mother, Margaret White. She is the absolute epicenter of Carrie's isolated, warped world. The book really dives deep into Margaret's extreme fundamentalist beliefs, her concept of the curse of intercourse, this twisted conviction that sex itself was a sin, punishable by God. This belief is something she inflicted on Carrie daily, turning their home into this psychological prison. These holy days worship sessions, a stark, joyless existence dictated by her completely skewed interpretations of Scripture. What's truly harrowing, though, are King's descriptions of Margaret's own guilt, her own sinful enjoyment during Carrie's conception. She internalizes this pleasure as something demonic and then blames Carrie for it, screaming at her, "I liked it, and you made me like it." This isn't just about religious zealotry, is it? It feels like this profound inherited trauma, a cycle of abuse where Margaret projects all her self-hatred and sexual repression onto her innocent daughter. This psychological cage makes Carrie's eventual explosion feel, well, not just understandable, but tragically inevitable.
It's really fascinating how both main film adaptations capture this terrifying mother figure, but with different nuances, highlighting different facets of her madness. Julianne Moore, in the 2013 film, she leans into this zealous, almost theatrical madness. There's a heightened sense of performance in her religious fervor. She's very outwardly dramatic, making Margaret's torment feel almost like a public spectacle within their private home. But then you have Piper Laurie in the 76 film. Her performance is intensely unsettling, much more subtly deranged. It's this suffocating presence that feels deeply ingrained, almost bone deep. Laurie's Margaret is quieter, more insidious. Her madness is like this constant, oppressive atmosphere in the house. Both, though, effectively convey that suffocating, almost claustrophobic environment Margaret created. It makes it crystal clear why Carrie's burgeoning power would eventually manifest with such destructive force. The house itself basically becomes an extension of Margaret's psychological and spiritual prison.
Okay, so now let's turn to the two opposing forces, really, that propel Carrie towards prom night. Chris Hargenson's relentless malice on one side and Sue Snell's intervention on the other. Chris Hargenson is, well, she's portrayed as a truly sociopathic bully, pure and simple. Her flat-out refusal to accept Miss Desjardins' detention after the shower incident is what directly leads to her getting suspended from prom. And we learn her father, who's this prominent lawyer, tries to throw his weight around, use legal threats to get her back in. But Principal Grail stands firm. And he reveals Chris's long history of extreme malicious pranks, like putting a firecracker in a girl's shoe, almost costing Irma Swope 2 toes. Seriously messed up stuff. And let's not forget that delightful pig poop insult she apparently hurled at Carrie over the phone once. Chris's hatred is just ingrained, relentless, and utterly unrepentant. She doesn't just dislike Carrie, she seems to want to destroy her.
Which really raises the question, what's truly motivating Sue Snell? After the shower incident, the book heavily emphasizes her profound remorse, right? And this genuine desire for atonement. That seems to be the driving force behind her asking her popular boyfriend, Tommy Ross, to take Carrie to the prom. She insists she's not trying to be a murderer, like another student, Helen Shires, suggests. She seems to genuinely believe it will bring Carrie out of her shell and maybe, just maybe, ease her own conscience. It feels like this complex mix of guilt, maybe a burgeoning social conscience, and perhaps, yeah, a touch of vanity, wanting to be seen as the person who did this nice thing. This really contrasts sharply with that practical joker theory suggested by Professor Jerome in one of the book's excerpts, a theory some might apply to Tommy. But the novel deliberately refutes that interpretation through how it characterizes Tommy Ross himself.
That's such a crucial distinction, and it's one King really invests in. The book portrays Tommy Ross as much more than just some dumb jock. That's key. He's presented as intelligent, sensitive, the straight-A student. even a poet whose work got published in a little magazine. This characterization makes his agreement to take Carrie to the prom feel much more believable. It's not just a cynical prank or him blindly following Sue's orders. He seems capable of genuine intent, even if initially he doubts Carrie will accept or how he'll actually feel on the date itself. This makes him, ultimately, a tragically innocent pawn in this much larger, much more malevolent game being played by Chris.
And the way Tommy asks Carrie to prom, it's so delicate, almost accidental. King handles it with such psychological realism. He approaches her in study hall, and she, naturally expecting a blow or some cruel joke, is visibly startled. He asks if she'd go to the spring ball with him. And there's this moment of internal monologue from Tommy where he notices she's actually far from repulsive, and that Sue had been right about Carrie maybe having a crush on him. Carrie, for her part, she's incredibly hesitant, totally fearing a trick. She even thinks with this heartbreaking clarity, you people think you can just go on tricking me forever?
Yeah.
But her eventual hopeful acceptance, I'd love to, it happens despite her own ominous internal observation that it will be a nightmare. That perfectly foreshadows the inevitable tragic turn the night's going to take. This unspoken bargain, this moment of fragile hope set against a lifetime of despair, it just perfectly sets the stage for everything that follows.
Okay, here's where it all really starts to unravel. The meticulous, depraved plan cooked up by Chris Hargensen and Billy Nolan comes together, leading to the horror of prom night. Billy Nolan, he's characterized as this classic greaser, totally subservient to Chris's will, it seems. And he takes on the, frankly, violently gruesome task of getting the pig's blood. The book details that really unsettling scene at Henty's farm, describes the brutal killing of the pigs with a sledgehammer. It's graphic. And Billy has this chilling internal thought: pig blood for a pig. It's a moment that just solidifies his dark, brutal nature, showing the depths of his capacity for cruelty, all just to satisfy Chris's vengeful desires.
Yeah, and Chris's cunning goes beyond just the bloody details. She meticulously rigs the prom queen and king votes. She slips fake ballots into the box to guarantee Carrie and Tommy win. It's a calculated move designed specifically to lift Carrie up to this pinnacle of triumph, only to yank the rug out from under her in the most public, humiliating way possible. This really twisted plotting is such a stark contrast to Carrie's own preparations for the prom. She makes a new dress. She feels this weird, dreamy feeling that King describes as half shame and half defiant excitement. She actually allows herself to hope just for a moment for a normal night. And Tommy's genuine kindness, his simple compliment, "You're beautiful," it's so powerful for her. She momentarily believes nothing bad could happen this night. It's just this tragically fleeting moment of perceived normalcy, of connection right before her entire world is irrevocably shattered.
And just before Carrie actually leaves for the prom, there's that final terrifying confrontation with Margaret White. It really showcases Margaret's complete break from reality at this point. The book describes Margaret's escalating fury. She truly believes Carrie going to prom is the ultimate sin, a direct manifestation of the devil's influence taking hold. She tries desperately to stop Carrie, physically clinging to her daughter with this fanatical fervor, weaponizing scripture, screaming denunciations. And this culminates in Carrie using her telekinetic powers, consciously this time, decisively, to lock her mother in the prayer closet. That small, dark space that's been both a literal and metaphorical prison for Carrie her entire life. It's this desperate battle of wills. And for the first time, Carrie's power is consciously used against her abuser. It's a desperate act of self-preservation, really. Okay, deep breath. We are about to dive into the most infamous, catastrophic moment in Carrie. The one that just echoes through horror cinema history. So before we get trenched, a quick reminder to all you curious minds out there. You're listening to Artificially Literate. If you're enjoying this deep dive into literature and film, please make sure to follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. You really won't want to miss what we explore next.
Right. So now, the true inciting incident. The pig's blood. The absolute catastrophe of the prom. You have the fake announcement, Carrie and Tommy as prom king and queen. That brief, agonizing moment of triumph, of acceptance, and then it just instantly turns to sheer terror as the bucket of pig's blood falls. The book describes it in agonizing detail, this sudden sickening deluge. And so tragically, Tommy Ross, the sensitive boy who was trying to do the right thing, he's immediately killed, struck by the falling bucket. His death is swift, brutal, utterly merciless. It transforms what was meant to be a cruel prank into instant, horrifying tragedy.
But here's where King's genius, I think, really reveals itself. You might think the blood itself is the ultimate trigger for Carrie's rampage, right? That makes sense. But the book makes it profoundly clear that it's actually the crowd's laughter after the blood that delivers the final devastating blow. Norma Watson, one of the survivors, describes it perfectly in her testimony later. She says, that was what made people laugh. We couldn't help it. It was one of those things where you laugh or go crazy. She says it was this visceral collective release from years of either ignoring or actively participating in the bullying of Carrie. This mocking collective laughter, this sound of profound derision rather than pity or horror at the blood. That is the ultimate catalyst. That's what unleashes Carrie's lifetime of pent-up fury. It's the precise moment all hope, all connection, all possibility of a normal life is just extinguished. And all that's left is pure, unadulterated telekinetic rage.
And in that instant, Carrie, now completely, utterly unhinged, unleashes a telekinetic rampage on an unimaginable scale. Reading the book, you see her targeted destruction escalate so rapidly. It starts in the gymnasium, then spreads outwards. She slams the door shut, trapping everyone inside. She activates the sprinklers, drenching them. And most chillingly, she manipulates the electrical wires to electrocute students and staff. King gives these horrifying specifics, like J.C. Vreck dances this nearly motionless dance of electricity while holding a mic stand. Rhonda Simard's tulle formal dress just blazes into flame. The gym quickly becomes this blazing inferno. Heavy light cables are described as flowing and jerking and riding like snakes out of an Indian fake years basket. It creates this chaotic, terrifying scene of absolute retribution. The 2013 film adaptation, interestingly, depicted Carrie's powers much more explicitly, more visually, and it included that compelling, tragically complex moment where Carrie actually spares Miss Desjardins, her one real defender. That subtle choice hints that maybe even in her rage, some distinctions remain, adding this layer of pathos to her vengeance, you know?
And the destruction doesn't stop at the doors of UN High School. Carrie's vengeance spills out, engulfing the entire town of Chamberlain. Her telekinetic powers manifest on this massive scale. She opens fire hydrants all over town, which renders the firefighters completely helpless as water just erupts uselessly into the streets. She triggers gas main explosions across Chamberlain, causing widespread devastation. The downtown area burns fiercely. Multiple explosions level large parts of it, and a whole residential area is also ablaze. It's a complete societal breakdown. The town is actively being dismantled by one girl's unleashed fury. And amidst all that chaos, Billy Nolan and Chris Hargensen meet their chilling, almost poetic end. Carrie's power runs them off the road, they're trapped in their car, and then they're killed in an explosion. Pig blood for a pig. It takes on this new, horrifying meaning. It becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy of their own making, a brutal mirror reflecting their own cruelty right back at them.
Exactly. The sheer scale of the destruction really emphasizes that this isn't just a personal tragedy anymore. It's a full-scale societal reckoning. It's payback for years of neglect, active bullying, and just profound cruelty. The entire town of Chamberlain is left with what the book so powerfully describes as terminal cancer of the spirit. It becomes this place just waiting to die, forever scarred by the night it essentially created its own monster. King forces us to confront the idea that the community itself bears responsibility. And, speaking of Carrie's mindset leading up to this, there's that quote that perfectly captures her terrifying resolve, hinting at the apocalypse she was about to unleash. She thinks, I don't know exactly what I'm going to do yet, but I guarantee you everyone is going to get a big fucking surprise. Chilling.
So, as the immediate chaos of prom night finally begins to subside, we turn to Sue Snell's really unique and profoundly disturbing experience during Carrie's rampage. She describes this inexplicable knowing of what Carrie is doing, where she is. It's like a telepathic connection that bypasses her normal senses. She just instinctively runs towards the chaos, compelled by some invisible force. And Cor Simard, another witness mentioned in the book, testifies to this same uncanny just knowing without any visual or auditory cues. It suggests maybe a widespread psychic resonance that Carrie's unleashed power created in the town. Sue eventually finds Carrie severely wounded, dying in the Kevlar parking lot, just this tragic, blood-soaked figure near death.
And this leads to one of the most profound and frankly devastating moments in the whole story, this shared consciousness between Sue and the dying Carrie. Sue experiences what the book calls the awful totality of perfect knowledge. It's intense. She feels Carrie's immense physical and emotional pain, her unbearable shame, her deep regret. She hears her whisper, I killed my mama. But it's not just Carrie's experience. Sue also gets this horrifying, unfiltered view of the complexity of her own motives in setting up the prom date. She sees the underlying currents of jealousy, selfishness, even amidst her stated desire for atonement. This shared raw truth just reveals the true depth of how intertwined their lives were and the human failings on all sides that led to such destruction. And what adds another layer of, bittersweet vulnerability is Sue's later discovery that she's pregnant. This makes her this symbolic survivor, doesn't it? Not just physically, but someone carrying the immense weight of the past and also this fragile yet hopeful possibility of the future. She becomes the witness, the repository of truth, and this unlikely vessel of new life in a world that's been irrevocably changed.
And the tragic culmination of Carrie's own story involves that final horrifying confrontation back at the house with her mother. Margaret White, completely consumed by her delusions now, firmly believes Carrie is the devil's spawn. She sees it as her divine duty to cleanse this perceived sin from the world. So she confronts Carrie, stabbing her daughter with a kitchen knife in this desperate final act of religious fanaticism. Mortally wounded herself, Carrie retaliates. She telekinetically kills her mother with a barrage of flying knives, a brutal final assertion of her power against the source of her lifelong torment. Then she destroys their house, literally tearing down the structure that had imprisoned her before she herself dies right there in Sue's arms, as the book vividly depicts it. It's just this moment of devastating release and tragic finality all at once.
And that final act, wow, it's been interpreted and adapted in ways that created some truly iconic moments in horror cinema history. The 76 film, of course, famously concludes with that legendary jump scare ending. Sue's visiting Carrie's grave, she's dreaming, and suddenly Carrie's bloody arm just bursts out of the earth. It absolutely solidified that trope as a hallmark of horror. It's classic, terrifying, and just an effective final jolt that leaves you reeling. Interestingly, the 2013 film actually had a planned but ultimately rejected alternate ending. Director Kimberly Pierce and the actress Chloe Grace Moretz apparently preferred a version where a pregnant Sue gives birth and then Carrie's bloody hand emerges from the infant, revealing the birth itself was all a nightmare. A lot of critics felt that would have been a stronger, much more unsettling finale. It would have been a more direct yet updated reference to the original film's famous scare, pushing the psychological horror even further. But, the studio ultimately overruled them, opting for the less impactful theatrical ending that we actually saw. It really highlights that classic tension between artistic vision and, well, commercial viability.
So, moving beyond the intense personal tragedy of Carrie and her mother, we see Chamberlain left as a town completely in ruins. It forces this broader societal reckoning. The scope of the destruction is just immense. Downtown burning, hundreds dead, Ewan High School is described as just gone, a smoking crater. The town is left with that phrase, terminal cancer of the spirit, according to the book. It's become this place just waiting to die, forever marked by the catastrophic consequences of its own collective actions or inactions. It's such a stark reminder that unchecked cruelty, even if it's directed at just one person, can ultimately consume an entire community.
And that level of devastation naturally raises these profound questions for society, particularly around the idea of the TK gene mentioned in the book's supplemental materials. Dean McGuffin's fictional study, Telekinesis, Analysis, and Aftermath, discusses the scientific community's theoretical efforts post-Chamberlain to isolate such a gene. And this presents a truly thorny moral and ethical dilemma, doesn't it? If a test could identify TK-positive children, what would be the ethical response? Would society choose early intervention, maybe some kind of treatment or training? Or would the fear be so overwhelming that the solution becomes far more draconian? McGuffin chillingly poses the question, a bullet in the head. It's not just a theoretical sci-fi quandary. It forces us to confront how we as a society deal with power we can't understand or control, especially when it might manifest in our own children. And despite scientific warnings in the book of a 99% chance of recurrence, authorities like the fictional White Commission tried to bury the truth, right? They were eager to just label Carrie as a fluke, leaving the world, as McGuffin puts it, right back at square one. It feels like King's chilling commentary on our persistent inability to learn from our mistakes, especially when fear just completely overrides understanding.
So what does this all boil down to for you, our listener? Carrie isn't just a horror story, is it? It's this profound cautionary tale. It's about the devastating consequences of extreme isolation, relentless bullying, religious fanaticism, and the terrifying potential that can just erupt when basic human connection and understanding fails so catastrophically. It challenges us to look beyond the monstrous exterior, to see the tormented soul within, and maybe confront the ways society itself can inadvertently or sometimes deliberately create its own monsters. It leaves you wondering, long after you finish the book or the credits roll, what hidden powers, both destructive and maybe even creative, lie dormant within us, just waiting for the right or, maybe terrifyingly, the wrong trigger.
Yeah, and if you connect that to the bigger picture, it really forces us to consider the long-term societal implications of ignoring these issues, of dismissing the tormented, the outliers. The book itself leaves us with this really poignant thought, almost like a final echoing warning. Forgetting Carrie White may be a bigger mistake than anyone realizes.
And on that powerful, truly chilling note, we'll close out this deep dive into Stephen King's Carrie. Thank you so much for joining us on Artificially Literate for this exploration today. We really hope you'll check out our other episodes, follow us for more deep dives like this one, and definitely stay tuned for the next book or cultural moment we'll be exploring. Until then, remember our motto: feed your brain, starve your inner fool.